when you're cutting these, you just want to cut through the skin. You don't actually want to cut through the tissue underneath, because if you do, particularly in the abdominal cavity, you could cut through the structures that you want to see, which sort of defeats the whole purpose of dissecting. All right, so now these two flaps of skin will be basically peeled back. You want to use the forceps in one hand rather than your fingers, just in case there's the chance that you might cut yourself. You would also prefer to use these rather than your lab partner's fingers, because there's a chance you might cut them. So if you are the lab partner, I recommend, hey look, there's forceps right there, let's use those.
Don't cut my finger.
In the entire history of me teaching this lab, I've only had 2 people cut themselves. It was the same day in the same semester, 2 different classes. No. Actually, one guy was cut by his lab partner because he reached across the pig and he was like doing the scalpel. Yes.
Mistook his arm for the pig.
Apparently. It's like, you're like peach and piggy color, let's cut you instead. Oh wait, you bleed, what's up with that? All right, so you may notice that there's this cut in the neck and there's this blue and pink goo in places. It's actually latex. It's been injected to ostensibly show you the difference between veins and arteries, and it doesn't. So you sometimes end up with a blue pig inside. All right, so now we have basically the muscle and various other connective tissue just encasing the neck. So we need to peel those back as well. Now, the difference between, we're looking for glands here, and the difference between muscle and glandular tissue is that, well, other than function, muscle tissue looks very stringy. So it looks like it's a bunch of strings held together. Whereas glandular tissue, on the other hand, looks a lot like basically chewed up wads of gum. So it looks like little balls of chewed up gum. For instance, do you see this tissue right here?
Yes.
Do you see how it looks more like chewing gum and isn't stringy, whereas this tissue over here is stringy? This is muscle tissue. This is actually a gland. So this is the submandibular salivary gland. It's submandible, it's beneath the jaw. There are 2 of them. There's one on each side. That's the joy of bilateral symmetry. So if I cut over here, you would see the second one, but I'm not going to because that's time consuming. All right, so this wide structure you can see me working around, this wide structure right here. If you put your fingers in there, you would feel how solid it is. That's the larynx, it's the voice box. All right, so there is a gland that actually sits on either side of the trachea, so the air pipe. There's a gland that sits on either side, and part of it is on top of the heart. This is one half of it. The other half is right here. This is the thymus. The thymus matures white blood cells, so it's part of the immune system. Need my thymus. All right, so you can see that part of it is here, part of it is here, and it connects down here, which you can't see. But you'll also notice there are 2 muscles in between. These muscles actually control the movement of the voice box. Those.
What are they called?
I have no idea. I don't know muscles. Do I know that I should know muscles? Yes. Do I know muscles? No. You also have to understand that before I taught this class, I didn't know much about vertebrates in general because I'm an invertebrate person. or so you think. All right, so once you've removed or moved those muscles to the sides, you'll see that there is this little brown glandular structure right here. That's the thyroid. The thyroid actually releases the hormone that helps control the metabolism. If you look below that, you can see the trachea. You'll see that the trachea has rings. These are the cartilaginous rings. They're the rings of cartilage that keep the trachea open, regardless of what position you're in. So, structures of the throat: submandibular salivary glands, thymus, thyroid, larynx, trachea. The esophagus is actually in there as well, but it's underneath, and you'd actually have to remove the trachea in order to see it. We can see we're unlikely to see the esophagus because it runs along behind the trachea, behind the lungs, as well as behind the heart, and then down through the diaphragm and into the abdominal cavity. All right, structures of